Good afternoon, Jeremy.
Hello, Donald. How you doing?
I'm all right. This time change is kicking my butt a little bit. I'm just getting over this sinus junk.
Yeah,
Still got a little bit of cough, but I'm
yeah,
better.
daylight savings really sucks. I hate it.
Yeah, I got that shot about a week and a half, or Monday will be a week. I guess it will be. But yeah, it was rough. Rough. Not yesterday, but last Sunday, or not today. Today's Sunday, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, today's Sunday.
Yeah, week go was rough. Week go was rough, but I'm doing a lot better.
That's good. Yeah,
So
I've just been working, writing in my book, and taking the time out to do this. I've been looking forward to this episode.
I need to get back into the writing thing. I ain't touched on that Southern Paranormal stuff in a long time. I need to get back on track of that. But I want to go back and remember where we went and some of the investigations we did back in 14, 15, 16, just to be able to write something.
Yeah, well, I haven't done anything since October.
I ain't done nothing in probably a year and a half
Oh,
with
well,
that stuff. So yeah,
that's a little longer than me.
yeah, I'm about to get some of your short stories and read some of them whenever you get them
Yeah.
around.
Have I sent you anything?
I don't think so. I would have read it. I don't know. I can't keep up.
Oh, I'll have to make sure I send you something.
If it didn't happen the last week, I don't remember it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Um, this episode, we are going to be focusing on the career of Sting and what a career it's been for him.
He's been around since the mid 80s.
Well, I've got a thing pulled up here that, according to Cage Match, his first wrestling match was back in November of 1985.
85.
Yeah.
Independent wrestling. Yeah, all California Championship Wrestling. He was
That,
tag he was tag team with Jim Hillwig, who is better known as the Ultimate Warrior.
and when they made their debut, they were known. Well, a lot of people knew them as the Blade Runners, but before that, they were actually known as Freedom Fighters, and their names were Flash and Justice. Sting
Power
being
Team USA, yeah. Part of the Power Team USA stable. And then he went to CWS Freedom Fighters in 86. That's where they joined UWF, which was Mid South, actually, before UWF. They changed the name and all that. I remember when that happened too, because that
yeah,
was a big thing on Saturday. After Saturday morning cartoons, you got to watch wrestling. And I remember me and my granddad would watch Mid South every weekend
yeah,
religiously. Um, but yeah, it was Mid South, and then it changed to UWF, and it didn't last very long. Only a couple years after the switch. I don't know why it went under at that time. Uh, but my earliest recollection of Sting was when I was probably 12, I guess. They had the county fair out here, which was a big thing when you were a kid.
uh-huh.
You go on Saturday and ride all the rides for one price, and when you could afford to ride the rides back then, it was like back then you could pay like $12. You could ride everything all day long. Now it's I don't know 25, $30, I think, and it's only a certain amount of time now. It's not all day.
Probably per ride now.
Well, every ride is now is like takes two or three tickets, and each ticket is like $2. So it's ridiculous. The good old days. The '80s were the good old days. But
The good old
anyway,
It's when you can afford anything and everything, just about.
Yeah. We rode rides on Saturday, and I remember my mother getting us tickets. She took me, and of course, we went to the fair. I don't think my granddad went. Can't remember if he went or not. I don't think he did, but Mid South. It was actually listed as Mid South Wrestling, and man, I remember 12-year-old. I remember line out the door down the street. Uh, Everybody going to see wrestling, and don't remember much of the card that night. I think one of the other shows I had showed you some pictures
Yeah.
from back then. I think the Fantastics were there, Rock and Roll, of course, Flash and the Rock. I think is what Hillwig was going as. At
He
that,
was rocked, yes.
um, but I remember seeing them. Duggan, or not Duggan, DiBiase. Duggan was there. DiBiase was there. I remember, the storyline was DiBiase was bringing those guys in as part of his stable. Back then they had you had, of course, your babyface and your heels. Akbar, Skandar Akbar was your big manager heel back then, and he had a thing called Devastation Incorporated, and they had people like Big Brother Rogers, One Man Gang, um, and then you had DiBiase that was kind of heel, but he wasn't part of Devastation. Um, oh God, I remember the Grappler too. But anyway, it was part of DiBiase's crew that came in, and I don't remember Hillwig's. I don't remember Warrior staying around very long in Mid South.
Uh,
Sting went to kind of singles competition at that point in time, or he was teamed up with some other guy, Eddie Gilbert. I think he was teamed up with Eddie Gilbert some.
let's see here.
But that would have been
Okay, yeah, I see. I see where he was teamed up with Eddie Gilbert. They were known as Hot Stuff and Hyatt International.
okay. That was part of Missy Hyatt's because Missy Hyatt was tied in with Gilbert too for a long time.
And they also won the UWF Tag Team Championship too from the Fantastics.
Okay. Oh, back then you had some good tag teams. They were set up as tag teams from the get go. I remember when Fantastics kind of split. They didn't really split, the usual way tag teams split, these days where they feuding with each other. They just kind of went different ways for whatever reason. Oh, Terry Taylor was back during that time.
Yeah, Terry Taylor. I was actually looking at the card of the Mid South Wrestling that they had before going into the UWF, and everybody is on there. Terry Taylor's on there, Jim Duggan, Buzz Sawyer. Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
Dick Slater, Tracy Smothers.
Remember Tracy Smothers, Robert Martin, Ricky Gibson.
Yeah, Ricky. Well, this one here says Ricky.
Say again. Sure. Thank you.
Steve Dahl is on there. Coco Beware.
Yeah, Coco was there.
Yeah,
The Birdman.
In a singles match with Eddie Gilbert, and he beat him. Ted DiBiase, Steve Williams, yeah, all of these guys.
Andre was there for just a little while. He was coming through. I think he was on a tour type. He wasn't there on a regular, but he would pop in.
Yes, he was known for doing a lot of tours.
Black glove, Ted DiBiase. Yep, I remember that. The loaded glove.
I also saw a clip of DiBiase during the Mid South time where it seemed like the character that he was doing was sort of like a precursor to the $1 Million Man before he went to the WWF.
That must have been during the UWF days.
Was it?
Must have been because, like I said, UWF didn't last very long. Um, but I do remember the black glove. Now that you mentioned it, back then it was big thing with people loading something up. Whether it be a boot or a glove or you know, you got a lot more foreign objects back then that were hidden. You know,
Yeah.
I remember the grappler. The grappler was real big about loading a boot. He would catch a referee turn and he'd sit there and take his toe of his boot and tap it down like he's loading his boot up, and then kick him.
And then yet the crowd has to realize but he's still got to put his foot in there.
Yeah, it's just that whole thing is like I'm pretty sure there was nothing in there. You just the whole premise of doing it.
Yeah, because otherwise that would make you moving around be really bad. It's
Yeah.
hard enough when you get a little pebble in your shoe and it bothers the hell out of you.
Yeah, I've had a little bitty pebble in my turnout boots at work one time during a fire, and man, it was one time I didn't have socks on. I had just started. We had a fire during Katrina, matter of fact, when it was, and
Yeah.
didn't have socks on. They got wet or something, and I took them off and put my boots on, my turnout boots, along with my stuff, and man, it was like God. It felt like a boulder inside the
It
foot.
does.
Foot was all raw when I got done.
And I can recall several times I feel like a great big rock is in my shoe. And then I knock it out and there's this tiny little thing that you would think that you'd never be able to feel it, but you feel it.
It's like that old fairy tale, Princess and the Pea. Yeah.
But Sting, he when he debuted, he was originally a bodybuilder, so he had a much more built up body, and so did Hellwig. Um, and then as time went on, Howard went his own way and continued with the bodybuilding and got himself down to being lean, but not lean.
Right.
And Sting eventually went down to more of a stereotypical wrestler's build.
Dingo Warrior. Yep.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. He left there and he became the Dingo Warrior for a lot of times on these independents before he went to WWF at the time.
Yeah, and I remember the story went that when he did go to the WWF, that was when he was Dingo Warrior, and Vince was trying to figure out, well, what the hell is a dingo? And it turns out that it is a type of dog from Australia.
And it fits better, Ultimate Warrior.
It does, and that is partially true, Chris. But it was more along the lines of NWA had the Road Warriors, WCCW had the Modern Day Warrior, and he wanted Hellwig to be the Ultimate Warrior.
Right.
And then, as luck would have it, a couple of years later, all four of those men would be the same team as Survivor Series. But Sting, he ended up. They went their own way. Sting was in UWF for a while, and then he found himself in the NWA, and that was where everything really exploded for him. It's particularly after he had that match with Ric Flair. I think at the first Clash of the Champions.
That's the one where Flair won.
I thought that was where they went to like a 45-minute draw.
Mm. He had 2 matches, and yeah, I guess it was a draw. I do remember that it was a draw. And then I think they went again for another draw for even longer.
Let's see here. Clash of the Champions 1, 45-minute draw. Let's see. I'm not see. So as far as Clash of the Champions go, it was 45-minute draw, and the interesting thing about that particular event is that it was held on the same day as WrestleMania 4.
Yeah. Yeah, just give me a sec.
Yes. And even that was kind of controversial itself, because when NWA had Starrcade the year before, WWF was unveiling the first Survivor Series, and the legend goes, I don't know if anybody has ever really proven it or disproven it, but the legend goes that Vince McMahon told the pay-per-view companies that if you want to have WrestleMania for your services in March, you're going to carry Survivor Series and not Starrcade. So
I had never heard that.
I have heard that so many times over the years, but it had never really been said if that actually happened or if it didn't happen. But with how Vince was doing business back in the day, I can absolutely see him doing it that way. Say, if you carry Starrcade, you're not going to carry WrestleMania.
Red Baston? Who is Red Baston?
Who?
Red Baston is what I'm looking at Wikipedia. Who Capital Wrestling Corporation, where he was 3-time WWF United States Tag Team Champion with Lou Baston.
I've heard that name. I remember that name.
Anyway, that's who shows that he was trained by. And Rick Bassman.
Red Bastion and Rick Bassman.
Yeah, Red Baston and Rick Bassman.
Okay, Red Bassman actually used to wrestle in the WWF.
Right.
And was actually best man at Roddy Piper's wedding.
Really?
Well, the things you find out, yeah.
Yeah. Man, it's so much, it's so wild nowadays. You can just, you got to watch your info, but there's so much information now you can dig up.
Yeah. And truthfully, Wikipedia is not the most
accurate,
reliable thing to look at, because there are so many people that go in there, and it's to where anybody and everybody can sign up and
change whatever.
Yeah. And that had actually gotten a lot of people in trouble, believe it or not. Especially over the whole Chris Benoit thing when that was happening.
Yeah. For what it's worth,
let's see. But with Sting here, he did have a Starrcade one-on-one match with Ric Flair. Let's see. I'm having to open up so many pages here now. So
Of course, his real name is Steve Borden. He was born in Omaha, Nebraska, raised in Southern California. Says he played football and basketball in high school and later embarked on a career in bodybuilding. For what it's worth, Wikipedia once co-owning a Gold's Gym Health Club. He had no interest in professional wrestling, which I had actually heard that. Then he decided to pursue a career in the industry after he went to a WWF event in Los Angeles where he saw Hogan, The Sheik, British Bulldogs, and Andre. That's what got him, I guess, stirred up for it.
yeah, and this is after he had been doing bodybuilding.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things where it's not something that you yourself set out to be, but it's like one of those rare things where the profession itself chose you, and that's where the magic really happens, because you're not the one who's pursuing it. It's almost like this thing is calling for you because it wants you. And as it turned out, Sting comes in and has one of the very best careers a wrestler could ever have.
To span that long, I mean, me with the Taker, it spans, like that, a long, long career, and not a career where you're just kind of getting matches here and there. You're still able to somewhat perform. Yeah.
39 years.
Of course,
yeah.
And it's kind of jumping the gun a little bit, but there's always that dream match everybody wanted with Sting and Taker,
which actually did happen back in the early WCW days.
As Mean Mark.
Yes,
it's totally different.
It is different, but there are a lot of people out there that have said, "Oh man, I wish Sting and Undertaker had a match. They have never had a match." Not true. They actually did have a match, but this is before both of them. Yeah, Sting had already been risen up to the main event level, but there came a time past that point where he went beyond the main event level and was one of the guys. There's a lot of main event wrestlers out there, but now it's getting to that point where, well, everybody's in the main event. So who's in that next step level? What is above the main event? And Sting eventually broke past that point.
Back in the day when, of course, Vince bought WCW, Sting didn't wind up signing with WWE at that time. And I wonder how his career would have, would he got lost in the shuffle? Would he have just been a mark on Vince's radar to kind of destroy a career?
It's hard telling because at that particular time they were so full of top stars. It was crazy at that time. You had Steve Austin, you had The Rock, Chris Jericho was up there, Triple H was on the rise at that time. Now they're bringing in some of these huge stars from WCW, like Booker T. Look at the reception look at what happened to him his very first time. And when Sting saw that, he's like, I don't want them doing that to me.
Right. And that may be why he chose to, go his own way with,
That was exactly why he went the other way.
kind of tarnish everything that I've worked hard on my whole career just to get, pushed to the side.
Yeah.
Um,
But also, to be fair, Booker T, in my opinion, never reached that upper echelon that Sting did.
right.
Booker T did great for his career, several-time world champion, but I don't think he quite got up to the level that Sting had always been on.
Well, he was real big with Harlem Heat.
He was.
They were like top notch, tags back then when you had really good tag teams. Um, so he had, and I understand the whole split of your tag team and you're going on singles and all that. But to me, he was. I mean, he got. I don't think he was top guy, but he was really really close, even when he had the championship and all.
Yeah. Yeah. Booker
But
T was up there, but he wasn't a top.
and I think it's kind of like Bradshaw. They pushed Bradshaw for a while after the Acolyte split, and to me it was like I think they're looking for a top guy, but we're going to give this a try. I never did. I didn't like the John Layfield uh, character, which I guess is what you're supposed to. You're not supposed to like the heel, but
Right. But
I
it was
never could. I couldn't get behind it. You
but
know.
that character was more actually him.
Yeah.
Well, then again, the old one was oh boy.
I forgot about that. Good Lord. Yeah,
I,
that was
I forgot about that too. And
that's when they were back trying to do anything they can to get ratings, and that yeah. Whoever wrote that in there is they should have been fired.
I remember seeing a clip of that, and I actually saw it not that long ago, sometime in the last year.
Yeah, I mean we already know it's scripted, and I don't use the word fake. I say scripted.
Back
It's a
then, we
story.
did
You
it.
didn't. But when you do something really off the charts and stupid like that, it's like, good God. If there's any doubt in your mind now, it's fake.
It
It reminds me of the WCW when they brought in the Demon, the whole one that looked like
um,
Gene Simmons.
yeah,
Yeah.
and to think he actually had in his contract that he had to have a main event match, but he was nowhere near a main event wrestler. So they did a pay-per-view. I want to say it was Super Bowl, where the match that he had was billed as a main event match, but he was the second match on the card.
Yeah. Just,
Oh, that was terrible. Blink. Now, when RoboCop was brought in for WCW, I don't remember exactly what year it was. I think it was 90, maybe 91. I don't remember. This was during that time where professional wrestling was going into that whole kiddie thing, where it's all geared towards children and getting children to watch. And I think RoboCop might have been okay. 90. I think RoboCop might have been a part of that thing, even though the RoboCop movie is not a kid movie.
Saturday, May 19th, 1990.
Yeah. Um,
RoboCop RoboCop 2, release of RoboCop 2, with RoboCop rescuing Sting from an attack by the Four Horsemen.
So if that was May, then that would not have been Super Bowl.
That was
Wrestle War.
hold on. National Wrestling Alliance held under the World Championship Wrestling name. Capital Combat took place. Capital Combat is what it was called.
Okay, Capital Combat. Okay, that was one of those pay-per-views where they did one or two of them, and then that was it.
Wrestle War was in May. That was their first WCW's first pay-per-view.
Okay.
They held Wrestle War event in 1990 in May. No, Wrestle War was held in February. With WCW instead opting to hold a different event in May, this pay-per-view event held at the D.C. Armory, Washington, was named the Capital Combat, in light of being held in the United States capital city due to the printing error on the tickets. Huh. There you go.
And this is also that time where WCW had separate entrances for the faces and the heels. I remember that clearly. You had the ring, and then coming from this way was all the faces, and coming from this way was all the heels. Like they were really trying hard with keeping everybody separate because nobody liked each other.
Well, see, that went back to old school wrestling. I can remember going to live events, and you had separate dressing rooms for you guys. They didn't come out of the same side. Back in the day, you had, even little high school gymnasiums. I can remember, these guys coming from this way, and then these guys coming, from this side when their music hit.
Yeah. See, I wasn't in wrestling at that time, so I had no idea.
Yeah, that's now I'm trying to think back in Mid-South. Did they do that in Mid-South? I want to say they did a little bit. Of course, back then you could use whatever music to come out. They wasn't worried about copyright stuff. Because Junkyard Dog used to come out to Another One Bites the Dust.
Yeah, but I remember.
Man, when it came on, man, people went nuts.
And I'm still trying to wrap my head around how they even pulled off this RoboCop.
I was looking it up.
But it makes me think in later years when they had Jay Leno come in to do that wrestling match. David Arquette coming into wrestling matches.
You had basketball players. You had,
Yeah.
well, this guy's a carpenter.
Yeah.
Hey, throw him in there.
But I guess it was their way. Dennis
Rodman, yeah. Which I guess WWE has done the same thing, which not inadvertently, Snoop Dogg has now a win at WrestleMania.
Well, that wasn't planned. That was literally a last-minute decision.
That was by far the worst people's elbow ever done. Ever.
Now, I actually like that people's elbow that he did. Now, going across the ring, that was terrible. But when he did the drop, he put everything into that elbow. I think the Miz was feeling it that day.
Probably, and being the professionals they are, he probably saw it coming and probably tensed up and take that blow.
And also, let's not forget,
Highest elbow ever. Yeah,
also got in the ring too.
Who was that?
Shaquille O'Neal. He was a surprise entrant in the Andre the Giant Battle Royal.
I was like back in the mid '80s. I know we're getting off the Sting thing, but back in the '80s, the big thing, Vince did. You brought Mr. T in, you brought Zeus in. Uh, you remember Zeus from is it No Holds Barred?
No holds barred. Yep.
To face Hogan. Now I remember that, pretty well. And you bring all these I
Yeah,
guess
but
big characters.
with Zeus, it was a lot more believable than RoboCop ever will be,
Yeah.
and Mr. T.
Even David Arquette would be more believable than RoboCop.
Whew. Well, actually,
At least he is human.
he's
know.
still wrestling, I believe, to this day. Yeah,
David Arquette?
I think so.
No way. And when I see him, I picture that character off of Scary Movie, Doofy.
Oh. Yeah. Oh man. Oh, they did him wrong in that movie.
Yeah.
Wow. And then at the very end of that movie, he starts ripping everything off, and it turns out that he is actually like this Fonz guy, like a real stud type guy. At the very end of that movie.
I don't remember that. I just remember the goofiness and the vacuum cleaner scene. Yeah.
Wow.
That sticks in my head.
I am not going to ask why.
It's just one of those movie scenes that that's pretty funny.
Scary Movie did have some really, really funny spots there. And it makes me wonder, wow, they really went there.
Yeah.
But RoboCop, you know what? Sting was a trooper. I wonder what must have been going through his mind when
that movie came out.
No, when they approached him with the idea.
Oh, with the RoboCop deal.
Yeah, when they approached him with the idea, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put you in this cage, and then RoboCop's going to come out here, and he's going to break you out of this cage. Wow. And that was just a one-time appearance for RoboCop, wasn't it?
I would hope so.
I think it was.
I would hope so.
And then later on in that year, in 1990, WWF would do the whole gobbledygooker thing for Survivor Series. Where the guy breaks out of the egg and
was that WCW or was that WWF?
That was Survivor Series, where the gobbledygooker, the big ass turkey, breaks out of the egg and breaks out into a dance with Gene Okerlund in the ring. And this was when Undertaker was set to make his debut, and he thought he was going to be the guy breaking out of that egg before they told him what they were going to have him do.
Oh, really? God, yeah, that would have been a career killer.
It would have been, because he thought he was going to be the Eggman. Yeah,
that'll change history for good.
It would have.
I remember Pete Rose, I think, dressing up as a gobbledygooker one time.
Who?
Pete Rose.
Oh, he did, yes.
And Kane, because he got tombstoned by Kane. Either tombstone or chokeslam by Kane, like a couple years in a row.
Yep. Three in a row, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was dressed up as gobbledygooker. And then at WrestleMania 17, they had gobbledygooker in the ring in that battle royal. Yep, I'll watch that after we're done, Chris. I would love to show it on.
I saw it not long ago. I actually was watching I was watching a documentary on Sting on YouTube uh, last week after the retirement match.
Yeah.
I did watch the press conference too afterwards. Uh, their press conference isn't as professional looking, I guess I'd say. Looks like it's in a just a conference room somewhere at a motel, which I'm sure WWE is too. But they got a good way of you know making it look really good.
Oh, are you talking about
I'm talking
the
about the after the
after the pay-per-views, Tony Khan does that whole thing?
yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
it all
and
looks the same every time they do it.
and it's more, at least with the one that I saw before Sting came out, it was more character driven. It wasn't really it was wrestler staying in character, or at least that one did, as opposed to coming up there and talking about the kind of behind the scenes business. And I understand that WWE character or wrestlers are still doing that too, but it's not so far
Not like what AEW is.
right. They're staying in that character the whole time they're talking.
Yeah, if you watch the one with Christian, when he did his that one time after,
Hmm.
well, that's the one you want to watch because
Pissed off at the world.
he's he's in that same character that he is in the ring right there. He's just sitting there and giving these "I'm better than you" speeches and all of that.
So you're talking to the character, not
That's the
Christian.
character talking to the people
Right. Instead of
press. Yeah.
right.
Um, but yeah, I, I really would love to ask Sting, what were you thinking when they asked you about RoboCop?
And it was probably that time in his career where I'm doing what they tell me to do, and this is stupid, but you know, I gotta have a paycheck.
It had to be that. Um, and Sting would go on to have some more um, different matches since then. He was part of the Chamber of Horrors match at Halloween Havoc, where everybody is in a cage, and the only way to win is by putting somebody in this electric chair in the middle of the ring and flipping the switch.
Really, I'm
Yeah,
about to go back and look at some of that stuff because I've never heard of that before.
that was Halloween Havoc '91. Um,
I'm about to write some of this stuff down
yeah,
because see, this was that time. We were talking before he came on the show. He was asking me about. Jamie was asking me about how much stuff about Sting I knew. I was like, well, got to see him when he first started out, and then when he was in WCW or NWA, and before, I guess when he was the Surfer Sting,
yeah,
really didn't get to see it a whole lot because we didn't have cable, and all that stuff was on cable. We lived out in rural. So the only time we ever got to watch wrestling was on Saturday mornings on regular TV, or when WWF had Saturday Night's Main Event, and some of those. So we didn't even get to watch pay-per-views.
I missed them doing those Saturday nights main events because those were really special events. But yeah, Halloween Havoc '91. That was Sting, Elegante, and the Steiner brothers against Abdullah the Butcher, Cactus Jack, Big Van Vader, and the Diamond Stud.
91, you said?
91. Halloween Havoc '91. First match. And we got somebody, I think it was Sting, but somebody got Abdullah into the chair. But Rick Steiner, I think, was in the chair. And Cactus Jack was going to go throw the switch. But by the time he got there to throw it, Abdullah got put in there. And all kinds of sparks come flying out, and now the guys were the good guys were the winners. It was just a crazy match that they came up with.
We were talking about early promotions and things like that, with Sting and all that. It got to reminding me of that. I've got some old wrestling magazines somewhere in storage somewhere. There's like a bunch of them, because it was like the Fangoria and wrestling magazines.
I used to have a lot of wrestling magazines, and I threw them away.
God, you imagine you read about some of the stories and stuff back then. I remember seeing Abdullah the Butcher in some of the matches, and they'd have pictures of some of his matches, Bob Roar matches, and just blood all over him, and Cactus Jack, Terry Funk.
His matches were brutal. Just look at his head.
Yeah, it's eat up. Sting. Jim Crockett Promotions World Championship Wrestling, 87 to 2001. Starrcade 87, Showcase Young Superstar Sting partnered with Michael P.S. Hayes, which was part of the Fabulous Freebirds. And Jimmy Garvin, a 6-man tag against Gilbert Steiner and Larry Zbyszko. And back then, it said it entered in a 15-minute time limit draws. Like, matches were like really quick back then. It's not the 30, 40 hour long matches that you have now.
Yeah, most matches back then, they did not last long. Rarely they did.
I remember, back Mid-South, they had 10-minute time limit. Most of your matches were 10 minute.
Yep. And I think that the world television title were 10-minute time limits on TV and 15 minutes on pay-per-view.
Then you also, like, your last match was, the big match everybody's waiting on, because back then, you had your wrestlers against your jobbers, these guys they bring in just to get the crap beat out of them.
Yeah.
And then you'd have little storylines, here and there through the show with promos and stuff like that. But then, it'd be, DiBiase versus Kamala or something, two bigger names coming in to actually, put on a show. And that was always TV time remaining.
Yeah. I was thinking about when Chris said that, I forgot about them saying with TV time, this match is scheduled for TV time remaining. And that never really clicked with me.
Oh, everything is pre-recorded anyway. It's all pre-recorded and edited and all that. But all right, we can really get this clash going towards the end, and somebody's jumping in and double crossing somebody, and we can go off the air right when all this excitement happens.
Yeah, and you could always edit everything down. And,
right.
And I so miss WCW Saturday Night. I really miss that program, the way that they had that all set up, because you had 3/4 crowd and then that big wall, that big production wall that you never see unless the camera actually caught a piece of that. And the way that I miss how they did that. But I understand why they went to Nitro and eventually did away with Saturday Night. I get that.
And that whole Saturday night thing, maybe back to when, that was your big night for, wrestling, like the Von Erichs. their sports center, wherever they were wrestling at. That was the big thing, wrestling Saturday night. So it's probably something that derived from the old days of wrestling when it was on Saturday night.
Probably. And they had that special start time of, what was it, 6:05?
Yeah, it was a weird time.
Well, that was how TBS was with
Auditorium,
all of their shows. It was 6:05. Every show that they had started 5 minutes after. Every show.
I'm sure there was a reason for that somehow or another.
It was. In fact, I'm gonna
Clash later. Let's see. All right, while you're doing that,
TBS. Okay.
Stingler stabbed himself as a rising star. He was one of the few UWF alumni to be pushed to NWA at Clash of Champions in '88, March of '88. Of course, he challenged Ric Flair to NWA World Heavyweight Champion and ended a draw in 45-minute, which we already covered. He lost to Flair in several non-televised matches. He battled members of Flair's stable, the Four Horsemen, Steam Team with Koloff. I guess that was Nikita Koloff at the Great American Bash. Challenged Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson to the World Tag Championship. They retained it, match in a 20-minute time limit draw. There's that short time limit thing again.
You ever noticed when you look at the matches that WWF had and you look at the matches that WCW had, there was a lot more time limit draws in WCW than WWF ever had. You ever notice that?
I didn't, and I wonder why. I mean, you don't want to push. You got two big names, and you don't want to tarnish either one of them by one I'm losing. Is what I get out of it.
I can see that, or maybe using that as a way to continue building on the story because you're not quite ready for that payoff yet.
True, you could do that.
I found it. Where's my mouse? There
What'd
it
you
is.
find?
No, I couldn't get my mouse. Every now and then, because with this three monitor that I have, I'll move my mouse and it's like my mouse isn't anywhere on either screen.
You got it stuck down at the bottom somewhere.
No, it's nowhere. It is nowhere. It's like one of those things where when you're loading up a website and it gives you that loading thing, and when you mouse over that particular area, the mouse disappears.
Yeah. Do you have is it wired or wireless?
It's wireless.
That may be why. Back in the day when they had actual little rubber balls in the mouse. Now it's all infrared.
Yeah, I remember that.
It'd get all messed up. It'd get stuff underneath it. You'd have to take it apart and clean it and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, even with this, I have to clean out the little rubber tips down here on the bottom because it collects so much dust.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I try to keep my desk pretty clean, but this thing gets so dusty. It says here the use of Turner time was also encouraged channel surfers who could not find anything interesting to watch at the top of the hour to still be able to watch a program on TBS without missing the first few minutes. So that's why
Makes sense.
So that's why they shifted everything 1 minute, and then and in a way it was almost like trying to monopolize everything because by the time your show was over, it was already 5 minutes past the hour and 5 minutes into a new show.
That would make sense.
Yeah, it would.
I'm just going to go ahead and keep it on this channel because I've already missed 5 minutes.
Yeah. So Ted Turner was really smart about that, but I don't think it really mattered to a lot of people. But I'm not a lot of people. Sting, to my knowledge, he is the only man to headline pay-per-views in 5 different decades. The 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 10s, and the 20s. He is the only wrestler that I know of who has headlined one pay-per-view in each of those decades. And I actually have a breakdown on this. In the 1980s, he headlined 2 pay-per-views.
That's the main event you're talking about.
That's the main event, last match of the night. Pay-per-view.
Hogan, maybe Hogan. Hogan had a
Nope.
main event in 2000s.
Hogan
Has
Hogan
Taker?
hasn't wrestled since 12 years.
Yes. When did Taker's been retired since?
Well, Taker had his last match in 2020. He did have a main event, but he did not main event anything in the 80s. So Taker would have 4 decades of main events.
You'd have to have a really old wrestler to match that.
Yeah.
You know, somebody like Flair. But we all know that ain't happening on a one-on-one.
Actually, Ric Flair? Did he?
He'd have to have a main event in the 70s, which it's different back then than it is now. You didn't before you had the pay-per-views.
No, but Ric Flair was in TNA. I need to, because Ric Flair headlined 80s, 90s, 2000, I think.
80s, 90s, 2000. Whenever your pay-per-view started really hitting in the 80s.
Well, he was with Sting in the 80s headlines. So far, I'm not seeing anything. Let's see here.
All right. While you're looking that up, of course, he was in NWA. He did face Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda. He was attacked by Hawk and Animal, the Road Warriors, after a televised match. Dusty Rhodes, as a booker, identified Sting as a face who was most over with the fans. Despite knowing that Turmoil, the Road Warriors heel would be no easy task, Rhodes himself teamed with Sting to challenge the Road Warriors to a tag match, Championship Starrcade '88. Rhodes and Sting got a win by disqualification. Of course, the Road Warriors kept the titles because of that.
Here it is.
So he actually teamed up with Dusty. Return to single matches '89. Starting the year off by wrestling Flair on a 1-hour draw. That was in '89 at Omni's New York New Year's Day. Omni at Atlanta's Omni on New Year's Day. He also had the first experience in Japan with a brief tour in All Japan Wrestling. Danny Spivey. Sting won his first title in NWA when he defeated Rotundo for the NWA Television Championship at a live event in the mid-1989. Great Muta challenged him at the Great American Bash. Controversial Dusty finish, even though Rhodes, the namesake of the technique, had been fired months earlier. Sting got the 3 count and was announced the winner, but a replay showed Muta's shoulder was up at the count of 2. So they decided to declare the title vacant. Of course, they battled many matches after that. Muta won the no disqualification match against Sting at a live event in September by using a blackjack to get the win and the title. Now he went during his, was it Sting that went over there and fought Muda recently?
Oh, recently.
I don't know that for sure. I know Muda retired. Didn't he? There was a big thing with him retiring
Yeah, he did retire. Actually, it'd be better to look
last
up
year.
the last year. Let's see here, matches. Yes, you went over there. Sting, Darby Allin, and Great Muta took on Hakushi, as in the Hakushi who wrestled in the WWF. Yep, yep. Uh, Took on Hakushi, Akira, and somebody whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce.
Another
Yeah,
Japanese guy.
yeah. So they went over to Japan on January 22nd. It was the event was billed as Noah Great Muta Final Bye Bye, but that was not his absolute last match. That was he had two more matches after that one.
Okay.
Um, I think Sting is actually the second man to headline a pay-per-view in 5 decades. He is the second man to headline a pay-per. Oh, hold on, because I forgot about Ric Flair and TNA. Ric Flair
Yeah.
actually headlined a pay-per-view in TNA in 2011, and then this Ric Flair's last match that he had 2 years ago, that was on pay-per-view. So technically, that was another pay-per-view headliner for him. And I am checking with the Royal Rumble. Let's see, 2005.
See at the
Technically, that is a headline for Ric Flair. He was in the Royal Rumble match in 2005, and that was the headlining match. So technically, that was another headline for Ric
for
Flair.
Flair.
So that's two. Ric Flair and now Sting, who have headlined a pay-per-view in 5 decades.
Well, him and Sting and Flair had history, for a long time.
Very long time.
He at one time he had joined the Four Horsemen. Of course, he finished out the year by winning a four-man round robin Iron Man tournament, Starrcade '89. In the final match of the night, Sting defeated Flair to accumulate the necessary points to win the tournament. The victor made Sting the number one contender for Flair's NWA title. That's which caused tension. Core storyline with him and the Horsemen. I remember seeing the video not long ago of them basically beating him down. It says Sting was summarily dismissed from the Four Horsemen February 6, 1990 at Clash of Champions X Texas Shootout after refusing to relinquish his title shot against Flair, thus restarting their rivalry. Later that evening, Borden experienced a legitimate knee injury while interfering in a steel cage match featuring the Horsemen. His injury forced the bookers of WCW to find a new opponent for Flair as a forthcoming Wrestle War pay-per-view. Luger was chosen at that point in time. So he got hurt. in a interfering in a steel cage match, and Lex Luger was chosen to face Flair in lieu of Sting.
Sting in the early 90s was pushed to the moon. Um, he was the guy. And I actually have a list of all of the pay-per-view headlines, all the pay-per-views that he main evented. Um, in 1990, he main evented 30 pay-per-views.
Who did? Sting?
Sting did.
In 1990?
The 1990s.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, that's 30 pay-per-views in 1 year? That's crazy.
Well, the way things are going now, they're going to have 30 pay-per-views a year.
Yeah, at least, different. Well, yeah, you got NXT, you got in WWE.
Yeah. But in the 1990s, he headlined 30 pay-per-views, and a good majority of them, he was involved with Ric Flair in some fashion. And then once Hulk Hogan came into the scene, then Sting really, really went into the back burner, because in 93 he had 3 pay-per-views. 90 he had 3 pay-per-views. 91 he had 3. 92 he had 5. 93 he had 5. And then in 94, 1 pay-per-view. 95, 1 pay-per-view. And that 1 pay-per-view in 95 was in the Battle Royal at World War III. 96, he headlined 3 of them, and 2 were because of the NWO angle. Then 91, he only did the 1 match in 97, I mean. He only did the 1 match in 97. That was that Starrcade. And then he did 5, he headlined 5 pay-per-views in 98, 4 in 99, and then just 1 in 2000.
I was just reading up on this. A little bit of interesting thing here. When Luger was chosen to challenge Flair at Wrestle War, of course, match between Flair and Luger, Sting came down to motivate Luger to come back and beat Flair. Before this, Sting and Luger had been at before that. Sting and Luger had been at odds. Luger was close to winning. Sting was attacked by Ole Anderson. Luger opted to save the already injured Sting and ended up losing the match by a countout. Behind the scenes, WCW officials had wanted Flair to drop the title to Luger at Wrestle War, but Flair refused, saying he had promised Borden that he would hold a title until Borden could return to the ring, despite the injury. So that says something about Flair. And that's about the time when the RoboCop thing came in.
Ric Flair had always come across as somebody who was a stand-up guy.
It's like your older wrestlers, guys that's been there and knows the business, and they got that clout,
Yeah.
They got to say so,
And by that point,
he had.
At one time, Flair was the booker.
And those guys, they know what's good for business.
Yeah.
And
then Jim Herd came in and screwed everything up, and that's what caused Ric Flair to leave. because he wanted to do like turn Ric Flair into Spartacus, something like that.
Why would you? I don't understand why you would change something that works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
That's because Jim Herd had no clue how things worked in the wrestling business.
That's that's to me, of course, the WCW has history of that. Bringing these guys that have no idea what they're doing.
Oh, they did that for years.
Instead of and that's one. You look at WWE why they were so popular and so they stand the test of times because you're running it by somebody who grew up in the business. McMahon is is controversial he is as a person behind the scenes and all that. He knew he knew most of the time what was good for business.
Yeah, with everything that's said and done about McMahon, wrestling would not be where it's at today if not for him.
Exactly. Taking certain chances and doing things kind of different. I ain't saying all his decisions were great. There's a bunch of dumb characters that's come along the way.
Here's the thing that I'm looking at with Jim Herd. Before he became a wrestling executive, he was a Pizza Hut manager.
Who who in the hell made a decision to hire a Pizza Hut manager to run a wrestling organization? That just doesn't make any damn sense.
It does not. But you know what? For the time period of what WCW is going through, that makes sense because they went through several years of having people running that company that had no clue what the wrestling business was about. It wasn't until Eric Bischoff, no, Chris, it wasn't until Eric Bischoff took the reins, and that was when everything changed for WCW. He was the best thing that ever happened for WCW
At the time. Now
at the time.
I think the real issue of one of the big downfalls of that era was the big contracts.
That was a downfall. And then
You can't make payroll. You can't make payroll because you're paying all these. You're pulling all these guys from WWF at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Hogan, it's a big one, huge. Bret Hart, huge. But you pull all these guys, paying them all that money.
Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, they actually had it in their contract to where if somebody gets hired in at more pay than them, then their pay has to be raised up to match that.
Right.
So they were smart.
Yeah.
About that.
And in the short term of things, it's great. Long term,
yeah.
Which at one time, WCW was beating WWF in ratings.
For almost 2 years.
That's probably about the time when Hogan turned heel with NWO, and then Sting started popping back in.
It was shortly after Hogan turned heel where they started winning the ratings, and then that was in '96, and then in '98. WWF started winning the ratings, and that was right around the time when they started bringing Mike Tyson in for WrestleMania.
That's when the Attitude Era turned. That's when Attitude Era came in.
Yes. And when the Attitude Era happened for them, that's when WCW started doing some really stupid things.
Trying anything they could to
Yeah.
get the ratings up.
And
Now, as far as the rating war between those two factions was great for the fans.
oh yeah, it was.
You know,
It was arguably the best time for wrestling ever.
I remember, when Stone Cold, wound up coming really big on the scene, and the whole Tyson and Shawn Michaels crossover, and then the McMahon thing.
Hmm.
Remember everybody was watching wrestling, and that was the big thing. What did you watch wrestling last night? Yeah, because I worked at two different places actually at that time, and I remember going into work. My buddy that I was working with, yeah, it was a talk for the first 30 minutes, talking about all the stuff that happened the night before.
There was a time, it was before the Attitude Era, but there was a time when I was in school, before I got into high school, every Tuesday at lunch, the principal would get up on the microphone and start quizzing me over stuff that happened on Monday Night Raw the night before. He did that every week for, oh man, about a year. It was a great time.
It reminds me of some of the documentaries watching. Different wrestlers and all. You got some of these bigger names that are now that were young and in school at that time. It's like, and someone was like, how many times I got suspended for doing the DX sign. That's a big thing back then. It's like, yeah, I got called to the principal's office more than once for doing the DX sign.
About that, yeah, that it was really, wrestling had really reached its peak at that time, and you got so many timeless characters that came from it. Steve Austin, because he was the guy who did what everybody wants to do at their work. Then he had somebody like The Rock come out. So funny, so charismatic. There was nobody that could touch him on the microphone.
And it was like back then, it was like, all right, do your promo, go with whatever, do whatever. We'll take the heat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how it was. It was make me money.
Yeah.
And then when the USA Network sent a letter to Vince complaining about certain things, DX took that letter and used it against him. That was the turning point where USA.
Is that the one where is that the one they pissed on?
They pissed off the USA.
No, I mean actually pissed on. Is that the one where I remember somebody taking a letter or something and they were urinating all over it?
Oh, I don't. No, I don't know anything about that one.
Maybe it's I don't know. I'll have to
The
look
one,
it up.
the one that I'm talking about is they stand up at a podium and they are reading this letter that USA
I remember
Network
that.
sent them. Yeah. That was when the executives at USA Network said, you know what, we loved it. Just go. Go for it. Do whatever you want. But going back to Sting and going back to the early years where he's headlining several pay-per-views a year, and then all of a sudden Hulk Hogan comes in and he's now headlining everything. Sting's going into the back, and I remember thinking and talking to a lot of my friends, what is going through Sting's mind now? And I know a lot of people have said that he has mentioned, you know what, Hogan is bringing in eyes. Hogan is helping us with the ratings. I'm okay with this. But for me, I can't help but feel that he had to feel some sort of resentment to that. Because before Hogan came in, Sting
He was the guy.
He was the guy. Well, he was the main baby face for WCW. And now here comes Hogan, and shortly after Hogan comes in, Randy Savage comes in. And now all of these guys are coming in, and Sting's spot on the cards is now not as guaranteed as it was before because, yes, he is established, but in terms of people knowing who you are, he's not as established as Hogan and Savage and some of these other guys that came in. So it's almost like, well, let's use today for example. It's like The Rock coming in now.
Mm-hmm.
The Rock is in now. All of a sudden, Randy Orton, LA Knight, they're nowhere to be found.
Right. It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Now, Randy Orton still got the. I mean, even LA Knight still got the fan base.
He does, but if
they're not pushing.
Yeah.
They're not pushing it. And somebody said something about, I think Hogan said Triple H said, LA Knight's, good. He's going to get his time. It's like the man's in his 40s.
Yeah.
He don't have much time left. I understand the whole storyline with The Rock and Roman and Cody and Seth and all that stuff. It's like, I'm hoping that at maybe after SummerSlam that things change, because eventually, way I see things, and I know we're getting off subject of Sting, but I see things coming to a head by the end of SummerSlam.
That's what a lot of people are talking about now.
And I see, to me, that's going to be the big change, I guess, not where the whole bloodline thing is now done, I feel. And then they're going to, this is if Cody winds up winning WrestleMania, which I do think that's where they're going to go. But
I still don't think that's the right call.
You're a Cody hater.
I'm not a Cody hater. I just honestly don't think he's the right guy.
What makes you say
I
that?
like Cody. I enjoy his matches. I like his promos, but I really don't think he is the right guy.
Yeah, he's a Cody hater. He's a Cody hater. CH.
Yeah, I can call you a Cody crybaby.
Go ahead. So are you going to be upset if he winds up winning?
No, because for me, it's just going to be, it is what it is. I have no control over what they're going to do. They're going to do whatever they want.
This is true. At least they're listening to the fans, what the fans want to see.
Yeah.
I see, like I said, I see SummerSlam end of the bloodline, or at least pretty much the end of the bloodline storyline. And then who's the next big guy that if Cody winds up winning at WrestleMania, who's going to be the next guy, that's going to go after Cody, go after the title. I don't see a long-term championship reign on Cody. I see him winning, finishing the story. He keeps it 6 months, 8 months. And it really depends on how they want to do it. I mean, there's so many different avenues and so many different ways and twisted turns they can do now. As a wrestling fan, I'm enjoying the storyline because you don't have no idea. You can only speculate. Okay, this could happen this way. This could happen that way, but you really don't know at the end of the day. This whole WrestleMania thing has really twisted things up with The Rock and all that stuff.
Right.
But back to Sting. You were talking about when Hogan came in.
Yeah, when Hogan came in, now all of a sudden Sting is pushed way back, and he has basically been relegated down to barely a mid card wrestler now. There were still some things where Sting did things with Hogan because I remember I want to say it was a Clash of Champions where Sting, Hogan, and Savage were on a team going against someone else, and Sting, Hogan, and Savage were all wearing the red and yellow colors.
Yeah. Looks like he joined in WCW in early '94, which was 30 years ago. Good God,
Yes.
I'm getting old. June of '94, he won the World Heavyweight title from Ric Flair in his first match at Bash to Beach in '94 in July.
Okay, here we go. November of '94, Clash of Champions 29. It was Sting, Hogan, and Dave Sullivan taking on the Butcher, Avalanche, and Kevin Sullivan. Okay, now here's the issue that I had here. I get the whole thing with Hogan and Brutus Beefcake. It made all the sense in the world. But in his time in WCW, Brutus Beefcake went through some of the worst possible names that you can come up with. He was the Butcher. He was the Zodiac. He was the Booty. I actually liked the Booty Man gimmick. I did like that.
The Booty Man,
Booty Man.
like butt.
Yeah.
Oh, good Lord! It reminds me of
Billy Gunn.
yeah, Ass Man.
Yeah. He had Kimberly with him for during this time. What else? He was the man with no name. He went through some terrible gimmicks in WCW. It's like they could not find what worked for him. But what did work for him was Brutus the Barber Beefcake. And he was insanely over. But in WCW, it just didn't work. And Earthquake kind of went through the same thing. He was the Avalanche, then he was the Shark, until finally he went by his own name.
Yeah, I remember the Shark. That's just yeah. That's a time when I wasn't really watching. You know, you had IRS and Doink the Clown and
IRS was a hit.
you had well, the Genius. I don't think was back then. I think the Genius, or was he? He might have been there.
Genius was from.
That was around that era. You had Mr. Perfect around that time.
Yes. And Genius stayed with them until he was with the Beverly Brothers.
Oh my God!
Genius and the Beverly Brothers, that was a great that was a great partnership right there because they complemented each other so well because they were in that same class for what they had.
You know, we should, if not, you know, I was thinking just off the top of my head, I was thinking about we should do a show on like the Attitude Era, the worst gimmicks, you know, the best catchphrases of career. You know, it might be something to do on a different show. An idea for a different show. Just come up with these different topics and we not really talk about current things, but talk about things from the past where it's like catchphrases.
I was in talking to somebody about doing a review show, but I ended up stopping that because really I've got so much going on. But I do want to do a second show. But it's a matter of actually having the time and well, I've got the time because I can make time for that. I just there's just so much crap that I gotta contend with right now.
See, I haven't done a shadow talks in forever.
I
It's just
know.
my time frame is just, and I'm thinking, yeah, let me start another show. Let's do another show on old school wrestling and all this stuff. But when am I going to have time? We're shorthanded right now at work, so I'm having to work extra time, which the way our schedules and all work,
Right.
one shift has to fill in the extra times for the 2 weeks. It's all an hourly thing. How
So, so,
many?
so you're going through what I had to go through at work years ago because we had such a terrible turnover because nobody wanted to put up with the bullshit that they were doing at work.
Well, now we have 3 shifts, and you have 5 shifts every 2 weeks for 2 weeks in a row, and then you have your third 2 weeks is a short check, which you only have 4 shifts during those 2 weeks. So you're the ones who gets to fill in to make your check a long check, if somebody's off. But now we're shorthanded, so the short check guys are the ones taking the extra time. Just so happens that right now I'm the short check shift. So I just came off of 48. I'm off today. I'm off tomorrow. Then I pull another 48. Then I'm off one day. Then I go back and work my shift. So, yeah, I'm working a bunch of extra stuff right now.
And you're basically living there when you're on shift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I go in like I went in Friday morning and I got off this morning at 7. Went in Friday morning at 7. I got off this morning at 7. So,
At least you're getting paid for all that time.
yeah, I mean, it helps. Makes your short check a lot better. Makes it into a regular check.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I mean, I got so much going on, and there's a bunch of different projects that I've got in my head that I want to do, but I've just got to get the time to do it.
Right.
You know,
got to prioritize.
Yes, I mean, between work and family and my daughter's softball and kids at school and the paranormal, which we really hadn't done much. Then I got builds that I've still got to get done. Then we got the podcast. Then I got class. It's I told somebody the other day I need 2 more of me.
All right, let's see.
Ironically enough, I vape, as people can see on here. But just caught my eye one day. I was at a convenience store and it's like, I don't feel like running and going and get one, from the tobacco place. It's like, I'll try these. I was like, I'll give it a try, and see what it does. This is cotton candy, which is actually pretty good. The first one I had was a strawberry banana, which is ironic that they would come out with that one first. The whole red and yellow thing. But these last really good. Hey, cheap promo here for you guys that make this. These last. It's got a timer and a battery thing on here, and I haven't had one yet that where it goes down to 0. That's basically your life. It's done. That where it's lasted like a week and a half to 2 weeks after it hit 0.
There you go, Hulk Hogan. Come sponsor us, please.
Yeah. Give us some of that money, brother.
Especially if you get a match at WrestleMania this year.
Yeah.
So in 1997, Sting had 4 matches total. 2 of them were in the first 4 days of January, and both of them were house shows. So really, he hadn't been on TV since December 2nd, 96, at least according to this. wrestling on TV until Starcade, and that was where the whole this was absolutely brilliant the way that they did this, where he is just hiding in the shadows, hiding in the rafters, and for the longest time nobody knew what he was going to do, whose side he was going to be on. Nobody knew until one week he come out and he attacked one of the members of the NWO. I don't remember which one he attacked, and that was when the whole building just exploded.
Yeah, that whole time frame with Sting taking I guess, a leave of absence. It built
Well, he
up.
wasn't taking a leave of absence. He just wasn't wrestling. He was still there every week. He was on
It
TV
just wasn't.
every week. He just wasn't wrestling.
That must be the time when I started coming back. Because when I started watching again is right when he started coming down the rafters and stuff. When the big
Yes.
hype was Hogan and him. I wasn't even watching during the intro NWO days.
Yeah. He was hiding out in the rafters. And everybody is wondering, okay, what's he going to do? What's he going to do? Who's he siding with? And because there was that whole angle where the NWO had brought in their own version of Sting,
Hmm.
and there was so much distrust with everybody in Sting, and he had enough. He left, um, and then he became the Sting that we know today, the Crow Sting. And Chris said earlier that Scott Hall actually gave him
The
the idea
idea,
of Crow Sting.
they had that shooting that's school shooting around that same time, and I read somewhere where he was kind of nervous about that whole you know issue with the way he was dressing with the coat and all that. But that's what the shooters had went in.
Uh,
Long trench coats. That was it was the first big one. Um,
Talking about Columbine,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that
That was it.
was 98, 99. That was after Sting became the trench coat. But I can see where he would be concerned about that. Um, and then they had that match, and then all of a sudden it's like the match that was supposed to be the biggest thing ever suddenly wasn't. There was a spot where there was supposed to be a fast count. Bret Hart was coming in because Bret had just had his Montreal screw job incident,
Yeah,
and he was going to come in and save the day for Sting and help Sting win the title. The only problem is they did not get the fast count that they were supposed to have had. And then all of a sudden, everything just did not work for them for the ending of Starcade that year.
well, that Montreal screw job is where I think McMahon realized, hey, I can make a lot of money by everybody hating me.
Oh, he did. And that was where Steve Austin really came out. He
Yeah,
was already on that rise, and it was because of Bret Hart that he shot up, but the whole thing with McMahon that took him to a whole different level.
yeah. I mean, there's no telling how many times he got stunned in his career. McMahon, I'm talking about.
Right.
Yeah, I saw a documentary with Stone Cold talking about that. You know, his life in wrestling and where he came from, and how he got to where he was. And
Mhm.
he said McMahon, it's like, you know, there's many times when he would, you know, do the kick and he would kick Vince, you know, in the nuts. It's like, you know, he don't know how many times he got hit low because he wasn't, you know, he wasn't a actual wrestler and blah blah blah. But you know, there's no telling how many times he actually got hit low. And they just took it like a champ.
That's because he knew that with every hit that he was getting, dollars are following.
Every time you kick me, that's dollar signs.
Yep. Literally. But yeah, the whole thing, it ended up turning to be anticlimactic when Sting made his return. The match did not finish the way that they wanted it to. It did not have the effect that they wanted it to, but the build up to it was just, there was nothing ever like that. And that was a big risk that they took for that whole year, keeping him from having a match. And then all of a sudden now coming back and he didn't do anything. He didn't say anything except waving that bat around. But it drove the fans nuts. It drove everybody nuts. And then after that, that was when everything with WCW started getting really bad.
Mm-hmm.
NWO started, they had way too many people. Now we have NWO Black and White, NWO Wolfpack. And then you started having Latino World Order. Look it up here. New World Order. Wrestling. Okay. So you had NWO Hollywood, Black and White, Wolfpack, Red and Black, Elite, NWO 2000, NWO Japan. Okay, I don't think that was part of. Oh geez. Okay, so you got the Wolfpack. All right, Elite. Okay, NWO Elite was the one that was formed after the Finger Poke of Doom.
What is that?
That was the one where after Kevin Nash had given Goldberg his first loss, then Hogan came in and did that.
Right. I remember that. And he just laid down.
Yeah. Then NWO Black and White, and then NWO 2000. NWO 2000 was the last of the WCW's NWO.
With the black and white?
No, 2000. Black and White was just an offshoot.
They had when the NWO, first started and Hogan's, went heel, it was like huge.
Huge. Yes. Because nobody ever thought that would happen.
Right. And then, him going Hollywood Hogan, and then you had all these spinoffs, which I didn't mind, the red and black NWO. Sting donned the red and black paint at that point in time. But then you had all these different, factions, you know, bunch of different NWOs. You had 4 or 5 of them in there. It's like, all right, you're getting ridiculous with it.
The original members that they had: Hall, Nash, Hogan, DiBiase. Those four. That was the biggest thing. Then the Giant joined them, which made no sense because he was WCW. And then all of a sudden they brought in the Sting, which kind of made sense because now we have Sting versus Sting, and I think they were trying to do the whole thing like they did with Undertaker versus Undertaker.
Yeah.
Then they brought in Six, X-Pac. Then Virgil came in. They changed his name to Vincent. And now everybody else starts coming in. Miss Elizabeth comes in, Eric Bischoff, Buff Bagwell, IRS, Boss Man, Scott Norton, Randy Savage joined, Muda. Everybody now all of a sudden starts joining. Dusty Rhodes joined one time.
Realized Dusty was.
Yeah. So it had really, really gotten ridiculous. And then the one that really hurt was after all of that was Sting. Now all of a sudden Sting was part of the NWO. Which basically killed everything that they had done the previous year. But this was also during that time when they had brought Vince Russo in to do all of their stuff, and he just threw crap everywhere. But this was also at a time where Time Warner was saying, we don't want anything to do with the wrestling business, and wanted to get rid of it. Even though there was a good period of time where it was in a very profitable business for them.
Mm-hmm.
They still didn't want anything to do with it.
I see here when WWF bought bought WCW. Of course, Sting had his final match with rival Ric Flair, wound up winning and they embraced at the end of the contest. After the WWF chose not to buy out Sting's contract with AOL Time Warner, he rejected a buyout offer of 50 cents on the dollar from AOL. Instead waiting until his contract expired in March 2002, he announced a short-lived retirement in February of that year. Sting then entered into contract negotiations with WWF, but ultimately did not join the promotion. So he did go into contract negotiations.
He did, but after he saw what they had done with
Booker.
Yeah. He did not want that. And you know what? Sting, he was one of those guys. He
was the last holdout.
He was the last holdout. Because he was born and bred basically WCW. And I think that he was probably smart enough to save his money so that he didn't have to go to WWE.
Right.
Buck Bagwell, he was brought in. He only lasted one match.
I remember when the invasion part happened with, after the buyout and all these wrestlers, to me they messed up that whole deal when they combined the two and basically turned into SmackDown and Raw. They should have kept it completely separate. And I've said this before on another show. They should have kept it all separate. Had two different companies intertwining. You know, these guys wrestle over here, and it's basically what they're doing. You
Yeah.
know, for the most part. But you got rid of all these, you know, these top stars, kept just a few, and then flooded.
Well, there were several that decided to wait out the contract.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Nash did it. Rey Mysterio did it because they were already guaranteed that money.
Right.
So this would be a great time. I'm going to stay home, rest, relax, heal up, enjoy life for however long that contract was. And then I'll get back into it.
If they'd have kept the entity of being WWF at that time and WCW, they could have had so many different crossovers,
They
dream
could.
matches. Because that's what, you know, me as a fan was like, oh my God, now we're going to get to see Stone Cold and Goldberg. You know, we're going to get to see, you know,
We never got that.
no, you know, got so much that could have happened.
Yeah.
But I think Vince is probably in the background was so adamant about I'm buying my competition and now I'm just going to crush and destroy. I'm going to technically erase it. You can't erase it, but you know, in that mindset.
Yeah. But he did raise some of the guys up, like Booker T. He really elevated him up. In
Look
fact,
at you know, the man who won't be talked about, Benoit, and then Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero.
yep. Well, Benoit and Guerrero had actually left WCW.
Prior.
Yes.
Okay. I was thinking they came over around
No,
the same time. Chavo was there, still there.
They came in. They jumped a year prior to them buying WCW.
Because they wound up winning championships the same night.
Not the
If I
same.
remember, it wasn't the same night.
No, Eddie Guerrero won the WWE title in February, and Benoit won the world title at WrestleMania.
Okay.
But they did have a big embrace at the very end of WrestleMania. That everybody
Came to the ring. Yeah.
yeah.
And
And
same thing with Mysterio when Mysterio won it.
well, Mysterio won, got his big push because of Eddie passing. Yeah. But Sting, he stays out of wrestling for a little bit. Let's see here if I can find the timeline here. Okay. Okay.
Oh,
So
05.
Sting has his match with Ric Flair on March 26, 2001. He does not wrestle again for almost 2 years, where he joined the WWA, which was actually an organization that was based in New Zealand,
I see that.
but they were doing a lot of spots in Europe.
He
Sting-
defended. Yeah, he had a second tour with WWE in May of 2003, successfully defending the championship against Rick Steiner, Shane Douglas, Disco Inferno. Held its final show, The Reckoning, on 25th in New Zealand. NWA World Heavyweight Championship, defeated Sting for the WWA Heavyweight Champion, unifying the two championships.
And then Sting moves over to the NWA. NWA.
The
Well,
TNA.
He did
Yeah,
do it,
yeah.
but it was TNA.
Yeah.
And there he has a another very successful run and headlines a whole bunch of pay-per-views. Let's see. In 2003, this is when TNA was doing the weekly pay-per-views. But in 2006 was when they went into, 2005, when they went into regular pay-per-views and had a TV deal. 2006 is when Sting starts headlining the actual pay-per-views, and he headlined 6 of them in 2006, 4 in 07, 3 in 08, 6 in 09. He only did 1 in 2010, 4 in 2011, 2 in 2012, and then his last TNA pay-per-view headline was 2013. And he had won their championship, their world title 4 times. NWA world title he won once. WCW world title he won 6 times. And then he also won the WCW international title 2 times, which to me, that was another world championship, not international. Then he won the WWA world title once, and then finally moved into TNA and won their world title 4 times. And a lot of his matches were with Kurt Angle. And for whatever reason, he was done with TNA. And now all of a sudden he's in WWE.
Yeah, that was, and that whole match with Triple H and all. I think they should have had Sting as a victor on that one.
A lot of people do.
I understand why they didn't, but you bring up the hype and you pushing all the hype of the match between him and Triple H. Just that was something that you didn't think you would ever see Sting walking into a WWE arena,
let alone wrestle in WrestleMania.
right? Just now nostalgic, nostalgia in there with the NWO showing up during match, and then you had DX showing up, and them two factions finally going at it. That was huge.
It was,
and that's the kind of thing I pictured back years ago when they bought them out. It's like, man, you can have these guys fighting these guys. At least we got a little bit of taste of that.
15 years before, when everybody was still in their prime.
Right.
And the match itself wasn't a bad match.
Didn't Sting get hurt during that match?
No,
that was after that. Yeah, that was later, where he hurt his back.
Neck.
Was it his neck?
Yeah, his neck. And every post that I see on Facebook, they keep talking about how Sting only had 2 matches in WWE. He had 4. He had 4 matches. The first one was with Triple H.
Mm-hmm.
And then 6 months later, he had a match with Big Show, and it was on Monday Night Raw. And then immediately after that match, he won, by the way. Immediately after that match, he has a tag match where he's teaming with John Cena against Big Show and Seth Rollins. And they win.
See, I don't remember those. I'm going to have to look that up too.
It was on Monday Night Raw. It was the same night. So Sting had 2 matches that same night. And it was
basically build up him and Rollins.
Yeah. Well, it was a week later that he took on Seth Rollins. And this was the night that Seth Rollins was doing back-to-back matches because he had the heavyweight title and then the United States title. He had just lost the United States title to John Cena, and now he's got to deal with Sting. And it was in that match that Sting got hurt, but he still finished the show. I remember watching that night and seeing how it was. I'm thinking, oh, this is not good because the trainer is in the ring. Sting is there in the corner, and we're thinking, holy cow, this is not good.
Yeah.
But he's
Remember-
still pissed
I
out.
remember him talking about that match, and he was telling us he couldn't feel his hands, couldn't feel his fingers. He couldn't walk
Right.
there for a few minutes.
But he was able to finish out that match, and then the following year at the Hall of Fame, he was inducted. He announced his retirement, and when he announced his retirement, that was when Seth Rollins really got that backlash because in that amount of time, for a couple of years, he was involved with Sting having that neck injury, Finn Balor having that shoulder thing where him and Seth fought for the Universal title. He ended up breaking John Cena's nose in the middle of a match. Yeah, there was a lot of backlash on Seth Rollins. He took it.
Yeah.
And then Sting's in retirement for almost 6 years, and then he returns in AEW. And now all of a sudden he is in tag matches with Darby Allin. 29 matches in 3 years. That's almost one match a month over the course of that time, and remained undefeated.
I watched that. I got to watch that match. It was a
It was a Texas Tornado tag match.
It was. I'm wanting to say the one I watched was a fan's view. Somebody in the crowd, because I was like, I really want to watch it. And it may have been. I'm trying to think if it was live. I think it was after that. I think the match was over, and I got to finally find somewhere that night that I could watch the match. And of course, the Darby Allin jump through the glass. I was like, oh my God, that's freaking insane. And ironically, then I looked up after the match was over. I got to see I found a video of a fan posted after it went off the air, because that's what I really wanted to see.
Oh, when Sting did his speech.
Yeah.
What was awesome about that night was before the match started and Sting was doing his intro, one of his sons comes out as Surfer Sting. And I think people thought that was really Sting at first.
Probably so.
And then his other son comes out as NWO Wolfpack Sting.
Yeah. They come out to Metallica, to Seek and Destroy.
And then the real Sting comes out, and now all of a sudden you have 3 Stings right there. Now, I saw a picture that night, and I see the 3 Stings, and I thought, okay, somebody took a picture and put 3 Stings in there. And I find out, no,
it was his sons. Yeah.
real. Yeah.
And they actually got, different parts in the match. They got involved in the match
I saw that.
as well. And I mean, there was these near falls all the way through there. You know, several near falls. Sting almost getting pinned in there, of course, um, and vice versa. But the match, or after the match, it was over with. You know, Darby laid down for a long time. He laid down there on the ringside after he went through that plate glass forever. And I'm wondering. I'm sure it was probably. I would guess it was sugar glass, but I don't know that for sure.
Even a sugar glass, the way that coming down.
Yeah, I knew when I saw I saw they were pulling plate glass out and setting it across chairs because that's what they did. They was really careful about setting it down on that plate glass. Like somebody's going through that. I don't know how, but somebody's going to go through that glass the way they set it up. And then I got to think, it's like, it's like, what's the setup for it? How are you going to set up, because you can't lay nobody on top of it, but I mean, he laid down there for a long time after that match, and you could see during the match, and then after the match, after it went off air, you could see Darby's back was cut up all over his back, because he's sitting there with Sting for a little while, and he got the mic. So like, all right, I'll see you in the back. I'm going to the hospital to get stitches. And of course, they had the interview. The interview was really good, and people were asking a lot of good questions. And
Tony said that he tried to get another 6 months out of him, but
yeah,
Sting didn't want to do it.
Yeah, and they were, kind of talking about how Flair was. The usually the whole rule of thumb is, your last match you retire, you lose to the next guy that's coming up. And
yes.
They kept talking to him about that, and he didn't want to go out, on top. He didn't want to go out as champion. He wanted to do what traditionally was always the thing. And they finally talked him into, staying undefeated.
And for somebody like Sting, that was the right call. Yes, the time-honored tradition is to lose your last match, but there are certain people where an exception should be made. Sting was one of those. Undertaker was one of those.
Well, you look at it too. All right, so you're going to have this retirement match, last match. The retiring guy always loses, so it's a good twist towards your end.
Yeah.
Do the unexpected. Don't do what we know is going to happen. It's kind of the way the WWE has gone. Right now with the storyline is there's so many twists and turns right now that you can speculate. You have a good idea what's going to happen, but you really don't know because there's so many different variables that could happen.
You can't even speculate.
Well, I like on social media, man, it's all over my social media.
Yeah.
I got back into looking at social media, Facebook and all, and like looking at, and there's so many, because you look at one wrestling thing and you immediately, 20 more pop up now. So it's like, man, some of these,
that's what they want too.
Some of these posts that some of these people are posting on there just way out of left field on what's going on. And have you heard anything about Brock Lesnar being back in some form or fashion on the network, or at least on maybe the website?
His profile was put back on the website. Beyond that, I don't know anything.
So that puts a whole new spin on speculation.
Well, it does.
Of him popping up.
It does, because I know that they were gearing towards having Brock and Gunther at WrestleMania.
I would, if it were me, if I wasn't writing thing, you'd have to jumpstart it pretty quick. Put him and Gunther at
The only way
WrestleMania.
that they'd be able to do it is they're having that gauntlet match Monday night, tomorrow night. The only way they'd be able to do that is have him come in at the very end
And
and
just destroy everybody.
well, it's no, this gauntlet match they just do 1-on-1, and whoever wins, they meet that next one immediately.
Okay.
After.
Okay.
So the only way that they'd be able to do that is to have Brock come in and beat whoever that last person is.
And see, to me, storyline wise, I would have Lesnar and Gunther at WrestleMania, and Gunther beat him. That would put Gunther way up.
It would.
Way up.
And he's already been a very Roman Reigns aside, nobody has ever dominated the way that Gunther has. Because he's doing it week after week after week after week. Even Brock Lesnar was not doing that because he wasn't around as much as Gunther is now. Nobody has.
He's not there. He's not defending, every pay-per-view.
Exactly.
Or Eddie, he was even defended on Raw against Jay. Now he won, but far storyline wise, Jay took him to the limit. He didn't waste no time getting the hell out of the ring.
So if they're planning on having Gunther and Brock, that's the only way they can do that is to have Brock come in at the very end of the gauntlet match and beat whoever's at the end. Basically, like what they did with Money in the Bank a few years ago when Brock won it. He came in the last minute, knocked whoever was on the ladder out, took the thing himself. Like when he won the Rumble a couple of years ago, he came in at number 30. Everybody was out in 2.5 minutes. He didn't waste any time. That's the only way they can be able to do that.
So I wouldn't mind seeing that match if he does come back.
Well,
They
teased it last year at the Rumble.
But I would
facing off.
I would pull for Gunther to win.
Yeah. And if he does win, then that means now they're going to have to come up with a way to get the Intercontinental title off of him, because that is going to be big news. It's already going to be big news now with how long he's had it.
Yeah.
But going back to Sting, because we're now over 2 hours on this show. But going back to Sting, he is, let's see, 10. He is a 14-time world heavyweight champion. 1 NWA, 6 WCW, 2 WCW International, but I think that's still a world title. 4 TNAs and 1 WWA. WWE world title. I think he should have at least gotten one run with it. And
even if he beat Seth, which of course being injured would be kind of hard, but even if he had beaten vacated the next night, at least you got that title.
Yes. Yes. And then at this stage in his career, I don't think it would have been realistic for him to win the AEW title. He has headlined a total of 65 pay-per-views that I could find.
That's wow.
Yeah. Across 5 decades.
In multiple organizations.
technically 4 different organizations when NWA turned into WCW. But yeah, he has headlined 65 pay-per-views across 5 decades, 5 organizations. So let's see. No. Here we go. So divide that by 12 months. That is a solid 5.5 years. If you took all of his pay-per-views and did it 1 month after another, that is 5.5 years where he was the main event.
I'm looking at some of his accolades. Most popular wrestler of the year, 91, 92, 94, 97. That's from Pro Wrestling Illustrated.
Yep.
Wrestler of the year, 90.
Yep. He's also been inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame and the TNA Hall of Fame.
The PWI ranked number 1 of the top 500 single wrestlers in PWI in 92. 15 in 2003, 52 on tag teams. Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I forgot about that one. Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame. Sting overall has had one of the very best careers any wrestler could ever hope for.
Yeah, it's time, and there was some talk about, somebody asked him what he's going to do at this point in time, in his career, and as when Khan was talking, well, I'm going to try to talk him into staying on board, and Sting was like, we'll talk. He said, well, and they both said, well, we'll talk about it. It's like, but I don't want to come in as, a manager or, announcer or whatever. He wants to maybe be behind the scenes, I would guess. He'd be an awesome trainer, for those younger guys. So I'd like to see him if he's going to do it. And he may just want to, take some time off, but I don't think, just enjoy retirement. But at the same time, I don't think he will. I think he'll take some time off, but then he'll come back in some kind of faction of, working in the office, working behind the scenes, doing something.
He doesn't really even need to do that.
No, he doesn't. But it's that you do something for so long, basically pretty much your whole life, and then now you're not going to completely shut off from it. You're not going to completely just leave everything behind from it. It's part of who he is. Wrestling again, I don't see. I don't see him ever wrestling again. But as they say, never say never.
At some point, you do have to say that.
And and I can see where, and it's in different sports. Your NFL. Your, of course, wrestling. Whereas like finish on top. Finish on top. Don't come in at 80 years old and still try to get in there and relive the glory days.
Well, Sting, as it stands right now, is 10 days away from turning 65. And he's done quite well in these matches.
Yeah.
These last 3 years, despite his
And
age.
That's another thing, if you stop doing all the stuff that you've done that got you here, you at that age, you'll get out of shape really quick.
Yeah. But also as he gets older, he really needs to be careful with what he does because he doesn't want to suffer the same kind of or re-injure himself with what he did with Seth Rollins.
Yeah.
So just retire and not wrestling again is the best thing for him. And he went out on top. He went out a champion. Not many people can say that.
No. And not many can say you retired and you won your last match.
Yes. Or retired and remain undefeated in the organization you retired in.
Correct.
Looking at his stats, he has had over 2,100 matches total, according to Cage Match. He's won 75% of his matches. So think about that. 2,100 matches, he's won 1,600 of them. Lost 420 and 115 draws.
It's a lot of damn draws. And that's probably early on.
Well, this is when WCW is doing a lot of time limit draws. Shitload of championships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's too many to even name them all.
You see, the ones that I have listed were all the world titles. He's won the United States Championship. He's won the Television Championship. He's won TNA World Tag Team Championships, UWF Tag Team Championship. He's won all of these things. I just wish that he could have won the WWE title.
At least once.
Yes, at least once. So, but other than that, he has had about as perfect a career as you can imagine. And to remain relevant and still do good in the ring at the age of 64. So anyway, that pretty much kind of wraps up our show today. When's your next Sunday off?
Let me look. That's what I was just getting into looking at. I'm actually off the 17th.
You're off next week?
Yep, St. Patrick's Day. I think that's when we talked about. Didn't we talk about doing it on St. Patrick's?
I don't remember.
Shoot for the 17th next Sunday, 1:00.
Yeah. I don't have a topic in mind though. Not yet.
That'll give us another week to discuss everything that's going on with and the road to WrestleMania.
We do have that request for pay-per-view review.
That is true. I have to look back on it and see which one it is.
I want to say it was the 1990 Rumble.
I think so.
But we can check. We can check on that. So that's one idea that we can do for next week.
We could do the Rumble and then talk about what's going on right now, currently.
That works. So do that then?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. I'll just go ahead and get the studio set up for that and be done with it. Okay, so Chris, Joe, thank you for playing along. we'll be talking about the 1990 Rumble next week. Then after that, we'll talk about what's going on currently. And then after that, I don't think we'll have a show until WrestleMania weekend.
Maybe.
Yeah.
We'll have to have one before it.
Because I know that was when you and I were talking about doing a show in between the two WrestleMania nights and then bringing everybody on to talk about the night before.
That's it. The 17th. Yeah, we may have to have something short, maybe a short show right before the first night. It's a 5th and 6th, isn't it?
Yes.
So we would have to do it on a weekday, which would be kind of Wednesday night. The 3rd, maybe.
We'd have to make sure we're doing it in a time because Joe is doing a Thursday night wrestling show on the network now.
That's Thursday, though. 3rd's on a Wednesday.
Yeah, he's doing a wrestling show on Wednesday night, and then he's going to be a movie review show on Thursday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here in a couple of weeks, actually starting next week, Joe's going to be doing shows Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Okay. We can talk about it next week.
Yeah, we can figure that out. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and call this a show. I'll get this put up on Spotify, and I'm going to go to my dad's house.
I'm going to spend a little time with the family.
Yeah.
Supposed to get on the Critters podcast, or not the Critters podcast, though.
Oh, yeah.
Don's. Yeah, that's it.
30 minutes. So
yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it. I'm going to try to get in there.
Well, he's going to have people come in at 20 minutes before, and that's 10 minutes from now to have a little chit chat and then start the movie. So you enjoy that if you go.
Oh, will.
Yeah.
You have a good one.
You too. Take care.
See you, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.